welcome to Players in Exile. My name is Phil, and today I'd like to look at the commanders for the upcoming Commander 2021 product, which I believe is coming out at the same time as the new Strixhaven set. First up, we have Bruner the Demagogue. So Bruner the Demagogue is a 3 CMC, so 1 colourless, 1 white, 1 black, bird warlock with a 1/3 body, and they have flying. Whenever a player attacks one of your opponents, if that opponent has more life than another of your opponents, that attacking player draws a card, and you put 2+1/+1 counters on a creature you control. So if you attack either of your two opponents that have the higher life, so you're in a 4-player pod, then if you attack either of the two with the highest life, not the one with the lowest, you get to draw a card and you get to put 2+1/+1 counters on a creature you control. If your opponents attack each other and they attack the one with the highest life, or if they are the one with the lowest life, the one with the highest life, or the middle one, then they will get to draw a card and you will get to put 2+1/+1 counters on a creature you control. So it's slightly political, slightly group huggy. Black and white do have cards that care about +1/+1 counters. I think in this sort of deck you'd have to run Proliferate, but you've got cards such as Elena, the Dusk Rose, or Karlov the Ghost Council. There's things like Archangel Athena off the top of my head, Cathar's Crusade, Vishkal, Blood Arbiter. So there's lots of cards in black and white that do care about +1/+1 counters. I don't think it's the strongest +1/+1 counter colour pairing. I think, as always, that would be probably blue-green or possibly black-green. Maybe black-green, actually, because of Corpse Jack Menace. It's an interesting card. It's very interestingly worded. I think you'd have to keep an eye on the triggers that it generates. Because there's no maze in there. Sorry, I was just reading through it. There are no maze in there. It is whenever a player attacks one of your opponents, if that opponent has more life than another of your opponents, that attacking player draws a card. So there's no maze there. And you put 2+1/+1 counters on a creature you control. So you're going to have to look for the triggers. Possibly the most interesting of all of these. I'm quite interested to see what sort of deck list they come up with, to be honest with you. Whether I get it or not, it depends on that. But it's intriguing. It's clever. It's different. I like the wording. I'd like to play around with it, I think. So what have we got next? Sapphire Thunder Conductor. 2 colourless, blue-red, human shaman with a 1/4 body. And they have Magecraft. What Magecraft basically is whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, you get to do something. In this case, you get to scry 1. And then, if that spell's mana value is 5 or greater, you get to create a 4/4 blue and red elemental creature token. And if that spell's mana value is 10 or greater, Sapphire Thunder, and it says Collector here, which I think it is a typo, it means Conductor, deals 10 damage to an opponent chosen at random. So this to me looks like what you're going to try and do is a little bit like Mizzix, I guess, is you're going to try and get out spells such as Goblin Electromancer that reduce the casting costs, and then you're going to probably cast X spells, because if you really want to get that 10 or greater, that's probably one of the few ways of doing it. Maybe in the odd exception out there, but that's probably the most likely way of doing it. Things like Red Sun Zenith, Blue Sun Zenith. I chose Mind Swipe as one of my examples, which is counter target spell. Unless the controller pays X, Mind Swipe deals X damage to the spell's controller. Or Epic Experiment, which is exile the top X cards of your library for each instant and sorcery card with converted mana cost or less X or lesser among them. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost, then put all the cards exiled this way that weren't cast into your graveyard. I'm not sure Epic Experiment quite works if you've got lots of X spells, but it's a fairly straightforward deck. It will be very creature light, I think, because you are creating, provided you're casting spells at 5 or greater, you are creating 4/4 blue and red elemental creature tokens. So I think you're going to cantrip a lot early doors to try and draw yourself into your deck and draw yourself into your mana ramp. And then once you've got your ramp on board, you're just going to try and cast spells that are bigger and bigger and bigger. Mizzix could probably go in this deck, and equally this could probably go in with Mizzix. I could see them either being played either or way round. I quite like it, but it is fairly narrow. You do want lots of mana ramp. I like the picture, I have to admit. The artwork's really cool. I don't know if I would get this one or not. I'd have to see what the actual deck comes with by way of cards. I can see that having a Planeswalker in there that also reduces the mana cost as well. So it could be quite interesting. Could be. Next up, we have Willow Dusk Essence Seer, who is one colorless black green for a legendary creature Dryad Druid. Who I'm sure that's easier to say sober than it would be if you were drunk. They've got a 3/3 body, and their ability says 1 tap. Choose another target creature, put a number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to the amount of life you gained this turn, or the amount of life you lost this turn, whichever is greater. Activate only as a sorcery. So you have to do it during your turn. You cannot do it to Willow Dusk, you have to do it to a different creature. But there's no shortage of ways to lose life in black and gain life in green, or gain life in black when other people are losing it. So I'm not sure that's going to be a particular problem. Black green also has lots of fun with +1/+1 counters. You've got my favourite Corpsejack Menace. You've got things like Grackmore, the Skyclave Ravager. It's just a weird example. You've got Rayhan, Last of the Abzan. Rayhan is quite interesting because it says whenever a creature dies, you can move the +1/+1 counters off it and put it on another creature, which preserves your +1/+1 counters, which I really like. I hate losing the counters when something dies. It seems very wasteful, and Rayhan saves you from doing that. So yeah, I can see Willow Dusk working. It's a fairly straightforward build, I think. Lots of life loss and life gain, and lots of +1/+1 counters floating around. Nothing new there. It's an interesting card. It'd be interesting to see what cards they include in the deck. I'm expecting things like Hardened Scales to be in there, but you won't get a doubling season or anything like that, I don't think. Let's be honest. The fourth one of the commanders, and I think the most interesting, is Ozgear the Reconstructor. They have a 2 red-white casting cost, so 4 CMC. They're a giant artificer, so they're a big lad, and they have a 4/4 body to represent that. They have vigilance, and then they have 2 abilities. 1, sacrifice an artifact. Target creature you control gets +2/+0 until end of turn. And the second is X, tap. Exile an artifact card with mana value X from your graveyard. Create 2 tokens that are copies of exiled card. Activate only as a sorcery. When I first looked at this, in my mind, the first ability was for sacrificing tokens. Things like Thopters, Servos, those sorts of things. And the second ability, in my mind, seemed more like you would get better value of it, say, for example, with Wormcoil Engine or Mere Battlesphere. Wormcoil Engine, obviously, if it goes to your graveyard, you're left with 2/3/3s. So if you could get 2 of them back, then when they go to the graveyard, you end up with lots of 3/3s, half of which have got Death Touch and half of which have got Lifelink. The more I think about it, though, the second ability could be used with things like Mishra's Bulbul because it's a 0 casting cost. So you're literally just going to tap Ozgear and exile Mishra's Bulbul and get 2 of them back. So Mishra's Bulbul says sacrifice Mishra's Bulbul, look at the top card of target player's library, draw out a card at the beginning of the next end step, or the next turn's upkeep, sorry. So you sacrifice your Mishra's Bulbul, you put a draw trigger on the stack and also get to look at the top card, probably of one of your opponent's libraries, and then you tap Ozgear, you get 2 of them back. You repeat that, so you've now got 3 draw triggers for the beginning of the next turn's upkeep, and you've had a peek at the top card of each of your opponent's libraries, so you know what they've got coming up, which I think is extra good value. So I can see you doing things like that with it by way of creating value for yourself. And as I say, I can see you using it for things like Mere Battlesphere or Wormcoil Engine. I can also see you doing it with something like Ichor Wellspring. So Ichor Wellspring says when Ichor Wellspring enters the battlefield or is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, draw a card. So for the first thing, you put it in, you draw a card, you sacrifice it, you pump a creature, and you'll get your 2 draw triggers. You could then play 2, exile it from your graveyard to create 2 tokens, and then you could then use the 1 again to sacrifice both of the tokens, so you're getting 6 draw triggers off of that 1 card. So again, plenty of value there as well. One other thing I think you could do this with is Darksteel Citadel. You could play Darksteel Citadel as a land. It's an artifact land with indestructible, so you can tap it, get the 1 from it, sacrifice it, pump up one of your creatures, and then tap Ozgear, and you'll get 2 copies of it back into play. So you've ramped, and those 2 tokens are indestructible, which makes them much harder to get rid of. Land destruction itself is fairly rare, but artifact destruction is not. But if you've got 2 indestructible artifact lands, both giving you mana, that's extra gravy. I can see also Darksteel Ingot working as well, but of course there's a little bit more of a cost there. You'd have to pay 3 tap to exile it and get 2 of them back, but again they're indestructible. So again, you've got a little bit of extra ramp there. So there's some great synergies going on there. I'm sure there are people out there that can think of far better things to do with this than me. I really like this one. Of them all, this is the one I'm most likely to get, I think. Bruner, I kind of like this one actually. Really makes me think, oh, I'd like to try and construct that. I would be tempted to dismantle my Breyer deck and actually construct something around the Reconstructor. Or we could say I could reconstruct my Breyer deck. I know, sorry, bad pun. Finally, we have Andrix and Nev Twin Casters. Continuing a long line of having duos or duets on Magic cards. They are 2 blue-green, or 2 green-blue actually. They're a legendary Merfolk Wizard, so they're also continuing a long line of Merfolk Wizards, such as Prime Speaker Zagana, and they are a 2/2 body. They have Ward 2, which is a form of limited protection, so whenever this creature becomes the target of a spell or ability that an opponent controls, counter it unless that player plays 2. So that's been keyworded now, which is interesting. So they are more expensive for your opponents to target, but not impossible to do so. And then they have, if 1 or more tokens would be created under your control, twice that many of those tokens are created instead. So that's parallel lives on a body in blue-green. Blue-green have no shortage of way of creating tokens. Don't forget, tokens also aren't just creatures. So you could have something like Coma, Cosmos Serpent, that creates 1 serpent every turn that you can use to tap other creatures or to make him indestructible. So I'm sure Coma will be quite happy to have 2 serpents every turn rather than just the 1. You've got cards like Tireless Tracker, which will investigate, and you can put a clue token into place, so you'll get 2 clue tokens. Then you have cards like Hole Breacher, which when your opponent attempts to draw cards other than the first one per turn, gives you treasure tokens. So rather than the 1 treasure token, you'll get 2 treasure tokens, which will enable you to ramp. What you want to spend that ramp stuff on is probably more ways to generate bigger tokens. And there you have it, Adrix and Nev, a fairly straightforward token strategy. Problem is with this one, I think, is that you could build it on a budget, but you're most likely going to want parallel lives and doubling season, and they're 40 to 50 pounds for each of them. So it could end up being a little bit of a pricey build. Also, as far as I'm aware, the blue-green token producers in Strixhaven produce 0/0 tokens. They get +1/+1 counters placed on them. If you're copying the token, you're not copying the counters, which means this is very contrary to the new, they're called fractals, I believe, the new fractal tokens that you'll get in Strixhaven, which is a little bit of an oddity. So there you have it, 5 new commanders, 5 new decks to look forward to, 1 or 2 of which I'm going to pick up. I'm probably going to get Ozgear, I'm probably going to get Bruner. I might get Zafai, but I'm unlikely to, given that I actually have a Mizzix deck. Willow Dust doesn't do enough for me to warrant getting it, and neither does Adrix and Nev. But they could be interesting. You never know. Once I see the deck lists, I might find the urge to build it. Thank you very much for watching Players in Exile. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, please like and subscribe, and join us next time when we talk about all things tabletop gaming.